Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This thought-provoking quote highlights a deep truth about how our lives can be controlled by forces we don't fully understand, often by others who know how to manipulate our emotions and thoughts. Manipulation is a psychological phenomenon that frequently happens subtly and almost invisibly. We don't realize we're being influenced, and we end up acting according to someone else's intentions, believing our decisions are completely our own. The sneaky nature of manipulation makes it particularly dangerous because it operates directly on the unconscious, where our vulnerabilities, fears, and desires reside. This video is a deep dive into 5 signs that may indicate you're being manipulated without even realizing it. We'll explore how these signs show up in our behavior and relationships, guided by Jung's theories on the shadow, the unconscious, and archetypes. By recognizing these signs, we can begin to free ourselves from influences that limit our freedom of choice and pull us away from our true selves. These 5 signs are like a flashlight, helping us illuminate the dark corners of our psyche, where the parts of us we haven't yet confronted lie hidden. By bringing these aspects into the light, we embark on the process of individuation, the journey Jung described as becoming who we truly are. Let's explore these signs together and learn how to protect ourselves from the invisible forces shaping our thoughts and behaviors. When we talk about manipulation, we're referring to a subtle, often unconscious influence that someone exerts over us. This phenomenon is closely tied to the idea of projection, a central concept in Jung's work. Projection is a psychological mechanism where we attribute aspects of our own psyche, ones we can't recognize in ourselves, to other people or situations. When someone manipulates us, they often exploit these projected parts, tapping into our insecurities, hidden fears, or desires. The manipulator connects with what Jung would call the shadow, that part of our unconscious where everything we deny or repress about ourselves is stored. Moreover, manipulation can activate certain archetypes in our collective unconscious. Archetypes are universal behavior patterns and symbols that exist in the unconscious minds of all humans. For instance, the savior archetype can be exploited by someone who makes us feel we need rescuing, even when we're perfectly capable of solving our own problems. Or the parent archetype can be triggered, making us feel small, as if we need the guidance and approval of an authority figure. The manipulation process is also deeply linked to the concept of the collective unconscious, which Jung described as a layer of the unconscious shared by all humanity, where these archetypes and universal patterns reside. When a manipulator accesses these parts of our psyche, they're touching something much deeper and more primal, something that goes beyond personal experience and connects to ancestral memories and patterns. These mechanisms are activated without us realizing it, because we often lack full awareness of our shadow or the archetypes that govern our behavior. So the first step to freeing ourselves from manipulation is to make these unconscious patterns conscious. We need to confront our own wounds and vulnerabilities because it's through them that manipulators gain control over us. In this context, it's essential that we develop a deeper understanding of how these signs manifest, as this allows us to identify when we are being subtly influenced. To better understand how manipulation can show up in our lives, let's explore some practical examples and everyday situations. These examples will help you recognize the signs of manipulation, shedding light on areas where we are often led to act against our own will, without realizing the hidden influence. Imagine a relationship where someone frequently makes you feel guilty for not meeting their expectations. They might say something like, "If you really cared about me, you'd do this for me." This statement triggers guilt and a sense of emotional debt, pressuring you to act in a way that goes against your own desires or needs. This type of manipulation taps into our shadow, specifically the part of us that fears not being good enough or fears rejection. Guilt is a powerful tool for manipulating behavior because we often fear being seen as selfish or insensitive. Another common form of manipulation is gaslighting, a tactic where someone distorts or manipulates information to make you doubt your own perception or memory. This might happen, for example, when you confront someone about offensive behavior, and they respond with, "You're exaggerating, that never happened," or you're being too sensitive. By making you question your reality, the manipulator shifts attention away from their actions, leaving you feeling confused and uncertain. This kind of manipulation is particularly destructive because it attacks your self-trust, making you reliant on others' interpretations of events. Manipulators often use praise and validation as tools of control, implying that their approval is conditional on you behaving in a certain way. For example, a coworker might praise you when you agree with them or follow their suggestions, but withdraw that support when you express a different opinion. This behavior taps into our need for belonging and acceptance, deep archetypes we all carry. The search for validation can lead us to shape our behaviors to please others, even if it means betraying our own values. A classic sign of manipulation is when someone constantly casts themselves as the victim or martyr to gain your sympathy or compassion. They might say things like, "I always do everything for you, but you never do anything for me." This type of manipulation plays on our instinct to right wrongs and take care of others, making us feel responsible for that person's well-being. The martyr archetype is deeply rooted in the collective unconscious and can push us to sacrifice our own well-being to alleviate someone else's pain or suffering. Lastly, there's the subtle pressure to conform, where those around us lead us to believe we need to adjust ourselves to be accepted. This can happen in social groups or at work, where we're encouraged to suppress our original ideas in favor of a more conventional or acceptable approach. This form of manipulation exploits our fear of exclusion, activating the tribe or belonging archetype, which is fundamental to the human psyche. Feeling disconnected from the group is one of the most painful experiences, and manipulators use this fear to mold our behaviors. By understanding these examples and recognizing the signs, we can better protect ourselves from the subtle influences that might be leading us away from our true selves. These examples show how manipulation infiltrates our daily lives, operating in the deeper layers of our psyche. The next step is to understand how we can use these signs to initiate a process of healing and liberation, connecting these experiences to the concept of individuation and archetypes as a way to protect ourselves from these invisible influences. Let's explore this more deeply in the next section. Now that we've recognized the signs of manipulation and how they manifest in our daily lives, it's important to understand how accepting these experiences can lead us toward healing and inner freedom. Carl Jung believed that to be truly free, we must face our wounds and bring to light the parts of our shadow that remain hidden. Accepting these parts is fundamental to the process of individuation, the journey toward becoming whole and authentic. When we are manipulated, it usually happens because there is something within our psyche that resists being seen. Manipulators often find their way into the areas where our emotional wounds are exposed, using them as gateways to control us. These wounds are often tied to past experiences of rejection, abandonment, fear, or insecurity that haven't been properly integrated into our consciousness. The process of individuation, as proposed by Jung, involves looking at these wounds and integrating them, rather than repressing or ignoring them. In the healing process, archetypes play a crucial role. Jung taught us that archetypes are not just behavior patterns, but also sources of energy that can help us transcend our limitations. For example, when we become aware that we are being manipulated through the martyr or savior archetype, we can transform that energy into something more powerful, like the hero or sage archetype, which helps us take control of our own lives. The transition from the martyr to the hero involves recognizing that while we may want to help others or sacrifice ourselves, we also have a responsibility to protect our emotional integrity. The hero invites us to seek truth and inner freedom, fighting against the forces that try to keep us trapped in destructive patterns. Similarly, activating the sage archetype allows us to see through illusions and manipulations, seeking a deeper understanding of what motivates both our behaviors and those of others. Manipulation is also tied to the collective unconscious, as many of the tactics used by manipulators are based on universal behavior patterns that we all share. For example, the desire to belong to a group, to be loved, or to avoid rejection are impulses deeply rooted in the human psyche. By becoming aware of these impulses, we can begin to free ourselves from their influence and reverse the control they have over our decisions. Jung believed that knowledge of these archetypes and unconscious patterns empowers us to transcend the blind repetition of behaviors. When we recognize that we are being manipulated, we are, in fact, uncovering a part of our unconscious that needs healing. Rather than resisting this discovery or falling into denial, acceptance and integration of these revelations are essential for our growth. Accepting our wounds doesn't mean resigning to them, but rather transforming them into sources of strength. Jung famously said that where there is a wound, there is also potential for the greatest growth. It is through accepting these painful parts of ourselves that we find true freedom, for it is only when we confront and integrate these parts that we can break free from manipulation patterns. This process of healing is an act of profound courage and self-honesty. It requires us to face not only the pain inflicted on us by others, but also the pain we inflict on ourselves when we allow our wounds to guide our unconscious actions. By becoming aware of these patterns, we take the first step toward living a more authentic and free life. As Jung wisely reminds us, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the final invitation of our journey, to accept the darkest parts of our psyche, our wounds, and vulnerabilities, as a way to achieve true inner freedom. Accepting that we've been manipulated, and more importantly, accepting our own participation in the process, is a powerful step towards self-awareness and healing. Manipulation, as we've seen, is a subtle dance between the manipulator and the hidden aspects of our psyche. These are often the parts we don't want to recognize or face: our fears of rejection, our need for validation, the sense that we aren't enough. But by bringing these truths to light and confronting them directly, we begin to free ourselves from the invisible chains that hold us captive. The journey of individuation, as described by Jung, is the key to freeing ourselves from these external influences. It is an ongoing process of self-discovery that leads us to integrate all aspects of who we are: light and shadow, strengths and weaknesses. By becoming aware of the parts of our shadow that are vulnerable to manipulation, we can start to transform them, using that energy as fuel for personal growth. Individuation is not just a goal or a destination. It's a daily practice of accepting our wounds, examining our weaknesses, and turning them into strength. When we commit to this process, we begin to realize that true freedom is not the absence of external influences, but the ability to consciously choose how we respond to them. It's the ability to stay true to ourselves, even in the face of others' pressures and expectations. The shadow, often seen as something to avoid, becomes a powerful ally when we learn to integrate it. Within it, we find the keys to our authenticity and true essence. By accepting our wounds and vulnerabilities, we stop being controlled by them and instead transform these parts into sources of compassion, empathy, and strength. When we embrace the totality of who we are, we discover that our weaknesses are, in fact, doorways to our greatest growth. As Jung taught, what you resist persists, what you accept transforms. Therefore, accepting our wounds is the most powerful act of self-acceptance and self-love we can achieve. I invite you, having come this far, to reflect on how these signs of manipulation might be present in your own life. Ask yourself, where are you giving away your power? Where are your wounds being exploited to make you feel small or powerless? By answering these questions honestly, you are already taking the first step toward reclaiming your control and your inner freedom. The journey to break free from manipulation is a voyage into oneself. It requires courage to look in the mirror and see not just what is on the surface, but what is hidden in the depths. It requires the determination to turn these truths into tools for growth, no longer emotional prisons. Remember, you are more than the influences trying to shape you. Your essence, what Jung would call yourself, is a powerful force that cannot be controlled by anyone but you. The path to this essence involves the total acceptance of who you are, including your wounds, your fears, and your shadows. May this reflection on the signs of manipulation inspire you to seek that inner freedom. May you find the courage to accept your wounds, integrate them, and transform your life through this newfound understanding. After all, true freedom begins when we decide to be whole and authentic, guided by the light of our own consciousness and the desire to live in harmony with who we truly are.